Every country, every organization, want to make tremendous growth like China and its organizations are doing. It seems that China is doing miracles. If you want to how such miracle happened, these videos will give in-depth of knowledge. Here is some physical comparison of China in 70s and now that can prove that nothing is impossible. We start from a documentary of 1973 that was filmed in Shanghai. The host identified a number of challenges for Chinese peoples and it is very astonishing to see that in last 50 years almost every challenge is fulfilled. Let's see what he wants to highlight in their documentary.
For anyone old enough to remember, Shanghai looks much the same as it did a quarter of a century ago. A generation has not changed the face of Shanghai as much as it has changed its soul. Shanghai's past reflects the glory not of the Chinese Empire, but of the British Empire. The Chinese would not have built a city this way. The history of modern Shanghai was written in the logs and ledgers of our great-grandfathers, Englishmen, Frenchmen, and Americans. What brought them here was a revolution of their making, the Industrial Revolution. China became part of an expanding world market and Shanghai its marketplace. The noble commodities were tea and silk. The ignoble commodity was opium. Our idea of foreign trade was to sell opium in exchange for the tea and the silk. It was a trade the Chinese neither wanted nor valued. We fought a war called the Opium War to open China to the world in 1842. Shanghai means on the sea. We do not think of China as a maritime country, but Chinese invented the compass, the watertight compartment, the fore and aft sail, and the stern-post rudder. In the 14th century, China was the most technologically advanced country in the world. Proud and complacent, by the 20th century, the Chinese were left far behind the industrialized West. Proud but no longer complacent, the Chinese have been working hard to catch up. Shanghai today has many ancient ways and modern problems, like the traffic jam. The waterway is the city's most heavily used highway. Rivers, more than roads or railroads, crisscross China in every direction, and Shanghai has always been the most important truck stop. Everything moves on the river. There is no energy crisis in Shanghai. Machinery has not yet replaced manpower as the greatest natural resource. Shanghai is building its own trucks and buses and even passenger cars now. But modern transportation has not overtaken the old. They coexist, along with a small fleet of leftover American DeSotos, Fords, and Plymouths, for official use only. If you get run over in the streets, chances are it will be by a bicycle. There are more than 1 million bicycles and bicycle bells. And thousands more attached to carts. China's problem is to move not just Shanghai, but 800 million people from the past to the future. The Chinese can't rush head-on into the 20th century. They have to get there in their own way. Shanghai's primary need was simply to find many people a place to live. Just a generation ago, thousands lived and died in the streets. No one lives in the streets anymore, except to escape the summer heat. There is no escape from the crush of humanity. Today, Chinese are encouraged to postpone marriage at least until age 25, and then to have no more than 2 children. Birth control is now government policy. There are still places here that look and feel centuries old. Where for centuries there was nothing but fields, there is something new, China's first modern suburb. About 1 million people, including several 100,000 young people, have been relocated from the inner city to the suburbs and beyond to the interior. The government is anxious to spread development and industry. It is learning that modernization has its price. That inevitable sign of progress, pollution, is not yet a major problem. But China's planners aren't ignoring it. They can't. There are growing signs of pollution everywhere in Shanghai. For the first time, the city is facing the urban realities that are well known in the West. There were other big city problems that Shanghai inherited from the West and solved. They were declared illegal. One was opium. The opium den was a major commercial enterprise. There were hundreds of them and thousands of addicts. They made millions of dollars for the Shanghai underworld, for foreigner and Chinese alike. Shanghai was a wide-open port where fortunes were won and lost, and where anything was available for a price. There are no two-car garages either. There are no privately owned cars. And there are no washing machines or freezers or television sets in any of these homes. There are no mortgages or credit cards.
After the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949, Chinese leaders are developing strategies that are wakening the dragon among Chinese people. According to the World Bank report, as a result of these policies, China's economy went from being low income to low middle income in 1997 and then to upper middle income in 2010. In 2019, China went from being a nation riven by civil unrest to having the second largest GDP in the world, with almost 800 million people have lifted themselves out of poverty. We will discuss here how China's economy has developed more rapidly than any other country in history. The rapid economic growth emerged from the vision late paramount leader Deng Xiaoping, who introduced capitalist reforms into a communist planned economy in 1978. In this video, we will discuss about China's history, human resource development models, managerial and leadership policies, educational reforms, and its overall impact on economy by the end of 2000. Napoleon Bonaparte once said, "Let China sleep, for when she wakes, she will shake the world." Well, China is wide awake now and is the second largest economy in the world. Professor Kishore Mahbubani, who was also former president of the United Nations Security Council, has rightly linked China's progress with its history.
Because China's future will be determined by 4,000 years of Chinese history. I mean, 4,000 years of history, there are all kinds of cultural impulses, cultural norms, cultural roots, and so they are at play within Chinese society. And I want to add another point. If the Chinese Communist Party was not in conformity, broadly speaking, with the deeper cultural roots of China, it couldn't survive.
During the time of Chairman Mao, the Chinese tried the communist model with their own modifications and it failed. Here again Professor Kishore Mahbubani has identified revised game-changer strategy.
I watch China as an outsider. It is fascinating to see the return of China because China is clearly struggling. It's struggling to find the balance between adopting a lot of Western norms, like free market economics, and at the same time keeping its own norms, and then blending them. And sometimes they blend them so ingeniously, I wonder how the hell they do it. But at the end of the day, you have to judge China by the results. And the fact that they have gone from having 1/8 the size of the Chinese GNP to, only being a few percent smaller is an amazing achievement. How did they do it, right? It wasn't just by copying from the West. It's also by using some of their strengths. And that's something that we have to understand. You have to understand China on Chinese terms and how they view it. And it's not easy.
After the death of Mao Zedong in 1976, Deng Xiaoping rose to power and led China through a period of reform and opening up that transformed China's economy into a socialist market economy. World remember him as the architect of modern China that were due to his contributions to socialism with Chinese characteristics. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more. By 1978 Deng was itching to get the country moving forward and fast. His visit to Singapore then became known as something of a widely heralded crash course in rapid state-driven, capitalistic economic development, with Li as friendly collegial tutor. We have listened the term, why to reinvent the wheel? To reinvent the wheel means to waste one's time working on creating something that has already been created by someone else. However, like was clear that, it is silly to think they will just copy us. They look at us and say, well, will this work in China? Where they think something will work, they take that particular segment and but graft it onto their system with some alterations. Deng launched a period of reform and opening up, intending to use lessons from more developed nations like Japan, Singapore, the United States, and Europe to help China escape its poverty and backwardness.
You once said to me that the person you most admire that you have known in your life was Deng Xiaoping. Because he single-handedly put China on that course.
Yes, because at the age of 70 plus, having been a lifelong communist, he spent just over a week visiting Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur and Singapore in November of 1978 and saw 3 backward countries
that had turned around,
doing better than China.
You and I had a conversation once about a whole range of leaders, and you said to me the man that you most admired of all the people you'd ever met was Deng Xiaoping.
Yeah.
That's what you told me.
Yeah.
Deng Xiaoping admired you too because he sent Chinese, 30, 40,000 of them, to Singapore to figure out what you were doing. Am I right?
Yes.
What was it you were doing that he wanted to see?
He was astonished when he came for the first time in 1978 to tell us to prevent Vietnam from invading Cambodia because they're doing it on behalf of the Russians. Then he found a Singapore which was contrary to what he was given in his brief.
Yes.
He found a prosperous, orderly society, everybody owning their own homes and with a job. So I said, how did you get there? I said, well, we educated our people. And look at all these companies, Americans, Japanese, Europeans. They bring technology, they train our people, we learn how to do things. And because we're cheaper, after a while we become general managers and company managing directors. And we learn how to do that and we become suppliers to them. So he said, oh, you made use of capitalism to build a more egalitarian society. Everybody owns their own home. I will do the same.
And he did?
He did. He did. He went back and declared 12 special economic zones. Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Shanghai, Thailand, and so on. All the coastal cities, and it succeeded.
So he was the greatest man you ever met because he understood, because of the results, he changed the nation, and therefore...
He's a member of the old guard. He fought in the Long March.
Right.
He chased the KMT out across the Yangtze. He led the...
He was a victim of the Cultural Revolution.
Yes, but he was realistic. He knew the system was not working. He knew that they were going to end up down in a deep hole. And he decided, against all the advice of his fellow old guards, that we would change course.
And he had the brains and the power to pull it off.
Yes. And when they tried to stop him in 1992 from going too fast, he went down to Shenzhen and said, learn from all countries in the world, and most of all, learn from Singapore. The order is good, and they are a very prosperous society.
Like was of the opinion that Chinese want to learn Singapore's secrets. Right, no one wants to imitate a failure. So if imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, Singapore today is one of the more flattered countries in the world. Li always knew that his obsession about China was in Singapore's long-term national interest. If a tiny vulnerable country like Singapore doesn't climb aboard and perhaps even slip into a seat behind the pilot engineer on the Chinese train, operating as a kind of unofficial backseat driver, it will be left dangerously behind. He has also steadily obsessed that if China itself didn't change dramatically, that train would never even leave the station and the whole region would be stuck without this huge economic engine. Like and Deng, the two leaders had in common extreme ambition, a determination not to let anything or anyone get in their way, and a shared sense of the Chinese people, everywhere, deserving a special place on the world stage. They first met when the diminutive, chain-smoking Deng, 74 years old, was still nowhere yet near the height of his powers on the mainland. Li, from the colossally smaller country south of the Malay Peninsula, was then approximately 2 decades younger and well into his powers over Singapore, though not so well known on the global stage. This was in 1978. The timing is important to appreciate. Li was worried about Singapore being left behind when China got back up to speed.